Welcome to my presentation for History 3001 Topics in the History of Trinidad and Tobago, 1783 to 1898. Project 1, a biography on Sir Thomas Picton. Emphasis will be placed on Sir Thomas Picton's contributions to the development of Trinidad. Trinidad being Spain and Britain. The capture of the island was crucial to British war strategy in the Caribbean, as the British saw the island as a threat to the security of the British West Indies. According to Picton, the island possessed an excellent harbour in Port of Spain. The land was fertile for the growing of sugar, coffee, cotton, and cocoa. There was an inexhaustible source of pitch and ample timber for ship repairs. It was also strategically located to the Spanish-controlled mainland. Sir Thomas Picton, pictured here, was the first British governor of Trinidad and is lauded as a military hero. He is the highest ranking officer to be killed at the Battle of Waterloo, and the only Welshman whose remains are buried in St. Paul's Cathedral. He possessed certain characteristics which distinguish him from the others. Picton stood at a well-proportioned 6 foot 1 inch in height, with a booming voice, hooked nose, piercing eyes, and a no-nonsense demeanor. He is described as having physical courage, self-confidence, and ability to take decisive action, all qualities of a leader. Described by the Duke of Wellington as a rough, full-mounted devil, but very capable. In private life, Picton was warm in his friendship, but strong in his enmities. He had a very strict sense of honor, which would not brook the petty deceptions of society. His manner was brusque, and his speech blunt, and without respect of person. He was a capable administrator. As a soldier, he was a stern disciplinarian, cold in manner, calm in judgment, yet an excited, overwhelmed with passion, with the foresight of a born commander possessing considerable power of combination, strong nerve, and undoubted courage. Biographical information. Sir Thomas Picton was born on the 24th of August, 1758. He was the son of Thomas Picton and his wife Cecile Powell, the seventh of their 12 children, he being the fifth son that they had. His parents Thomas, a country squire, and his mother Cecile named their baby boy after a brother who had died the previous year at the age of 5. The Picton family home was in Royston, Pembrokeshire, but Cecile gave birth to young Thomas while visiting friends in Havensford. Picton's birthplace in Hill Street, Havensford West, was marked with a commemorative blue plaque, pictured here on the right. The house later became the Dragon Hotel, pictured on the left. His uncle, Lieutenant Colonel William Picton, was an early influence on his life to join the military. At age 13, his uncle brought him a commission in the 12th Regiment of Foot, with the rank of ensign. Sir Thomas Picton was first sent to a military school in Chelsea, London, run by a Frenchman named Louis de Lachaise, in the hope that he would get a rudimentary knowledge of his chosen profession. He learned mathematics, military drawing, and basic principles of fortification. Lachaise, a proponent of physical training as well, insisted that all his pupils learn to swim and ride. Picton learned French. It was spoken from 7:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. on days of instruction. He learned the value of a good education and developed a love for reading, which remained with him for the rest of his life. In late 1773, Picton joined the 12th Regiment, stationed in Gibraltar, an important British naval base. Picton spent his time studying the base fortification, visiting the peninsula where he familiarized himself with Spain's terrain and culture and learned its language, Spanish. In 1775, the young Picton was afforded the opportunity to transfer. He joined the newly raised 75th Regiment of Foot commanded by Colonel William Picton. The regiment was disbanded 5 years later. The men later got drunk and refused to disband. The situation was a dangerous one because the city was full of armed soldiers facing the same poor prospects. Unemployment was high, and any available jobs were not likely to be given to soldiers who, in the eyes of the general public, lived outside the realm of normal society. The non-commissioned officers on the scene were unable to calm the men, and sent for the officer of the day, Captain Picton. Picton quelled the mutiny amongst the men by his prompt personal action and courage, and was promised the rank of Major as a reward. He did not. After living in retirement on his father's estate for nearly 12 years, the life of a country squire, Picton saw an opportunity to see action in military service again, as there was an outbreak of war with France. He decided to go out to the West Indies in 1794 aboard a merchant ship bound for Martinique on the strength of his slight acquaintance with Sir John Vaughan, also his Welsh neighbour, the commander-in-chief, who made him his aide-de-camp and gave him a captaincy in the 17th Foot. Shortly afterwards, he was promoted to major in the 58th Foot. Barbados, March 1796. Picton was made extra aide-de-camp by Sir Ralph Abercrombie. He was appointed as the new commander-in-chief as Vaughan. Here is a map of the Caribbean showing all the areas where Picton would have visited until his eventual departure to go back to England. On the 18th of February 1797, Abercrombie and the Spanish governor signed articles of capitulation. Upon signing the agreement, Picton was made governor, as he was highly favored and also had the ability to speak French and Spanish, which was an added advantage in a multilingual society. In Trinidad. For the next couple of years, Picton held the island with a garrison he considered inadequate against the threats of internal unrest and of reconquest by the Spanish. He ensured order by vigorous action. Viewed variously as rough and ready justice or as arbitrary brutality, Barrington. Taking advice from Cristobal de Robles, a strongly conservative Spanish official and landowner, Picton proceeded to take control of the island by hanging 14 alleged deserters without any trial. They were from German regiment. He also had a Spanish by the name of Celestino hanged for abusing a Spanish lady, Carmichael. The executions and deportations of individuals was meant to convince the population that Picton's word was law. It was a regime of impartial terror, with security and the end result. At this point in time, all effective power, judicial, civil, and military, was combined in Picton's hands. Picton was also accused of the execution of a dozen slaves, and the trade in captive humans was partly behind his considerable fortune. Historian Chris Evans said, "Delinquents who were sent for immediate execution might consider themselves lucky. Others had to endure mutilations and..." In Trinidad, Picton had 500 effective men, of whom only 300 were British, although on paper he had 1,000 men strong to supplement his force. These mostly German soldiers posed a threat to Picton, who had to control them, would confine them to barracks, and even went so far as to offer a reward for deserters found alive or dead. Picton raised a local militia comprising mainly white planters to deal with internal security problems which came from the French people of color. His aim in forming the militia was a force of 3,000 infantry, cavalry, and artillery in 5 divisions to be located in Port-au-Spain, Diego-Martin, the Rifle Corps in St. Joseph, Couva, and Pointe-à-Pierre. He also had a system of police, not only in Port-au-Spain, but over the island. With the police force, he was able to impose an 8 o'clock curfew on all shops and to restrict the sale of liquor to soldiers, which would again aid in his control. The roads, which were nearly impracticable, he made the finest in the West Indies, and he established trade with the neighboring continent. He declared war on Port-au-Spain. He declared Port-au-Spain a free port on June 6, 1797. Even though there was a continuing war between Spain and Britain, he still traded with Spain. To deal with civilian issues, Picton set up an advisory council comprising 5 members, but it was really the governor and his chief justice, John Neal, who ran the colony. By 1800, Picton requested in his letter to Henry Dudas that no more slaves be transported to the island, and that poor whites should be brought in to cultivate available and unused land. He also suggested that Indians from the mainland be used, to be paid for by the planters through loans subsidized from revenue. The firmness of his rule soon became apparent to all, and by 1799 the island had become profitable. His able administration of affairs led to his appointment in June 1801 to the civil government of the island, with such judicial powers as were formerly exercised by the Spanish governor. On 22nd October 1801, Picton was promoted to the rank of brigadier. He reformed the administration, making it more efficient, and his overall control was enhanced by the creation of new offices and the reorganization of old ones. Picton had sole jurisdiction in all criminal cases and could execute persons at his whim. In 1800, he issued a slave code that allows harsh punishment of offended slaves, and he allowed the introduction of all the savage customs and rituals of the French West Indian slave owners. Picton allowed his closest friend, Hilaire Bererat, to set up a poison commission which saw the torture and killing of a number of slaves on the plantations. Sir Thomas Picton, who became a slave owner, also advocated for the plantation system, especially for the production of sugarcane, as he stated in one of his letters. All intelligent planters who had resided in Trinidad agreed the soil is more congenial to the sugarcane than that of any other islands, and that with much less art and intelligence in the mode of manufacturing, the sugar is of much finer quality and the return much larger. He made not only himself rich, but also the island. Picton embraced the plantation system as he saw it economically viable to do so. He eventually took a free mulatto woman half his age, Rosetta Smith, as his mistress, and moved her into Government House. She bore him 4 children and shared in the many opportunities his position as governor afforded for making money. Among these was a lucrative fuel contract to supply the Port of Spain garrison, which he granted her. Smith was also said to share with Picton the profits for recapturing and selling runaway slaves who had absconded when the island was a Spanish colony, Carmichael. He was cautious of an attack by the many countries who wanted to take the island. He would make requests for more personnel and managed to get Lieutenant General Coiler to make recommendations to have St. Joseph as a suitable location for a garrison. He also got the sloop B and the tender regulator for Martinique with a detachment of troops and men from the Trinidad Rangers to lead an expedition against French privateers. Picton got a sloop to be based permanently on the island for trade protection and built Fort Abercrombie at Las Cuevas Bay as a suitable base for his protective work. He also took up with the Commander-in-Chief West Indies the question of support in case of attack, noting that he would be left open to attack with only help from Tobago or Grenada, unless there was communications guaranteed by a British naval fleet. Picton on Trinidad politics. Picton did not trust that a mixed and illiterate population such as the one he had could be entrusted with any legislative power. He suggested that it would be better to wait until the country was more settled and had acquired a necessary degree of constitutional consistency. There being no legislative council, Picton was instructed to appoint a council of advice, having neither legislative power nor control over the governor, to whom it would be responsible in an advisory capacity only. To this council, Picton appointed John Black, John Neal, St. Hilaire Bergerat, Don Cristobal de Robel, and John Newgate, and he gradually extended his field of working until the illustrious Cabildo was limited merely to the affairs of Port of Spain. He also revived the Court of Consulado, or Mercantile Court, under the eye of John Neal. To further the good of his colony, he appointed in England a Mr. William Knox, already agent for New Brunswick and Dominica, to be colonial agent for Trinidad at a salary of £500 per year. The Cabildo had their own plans and wrote to the king, suggesting that an assembly should be elected from the island's 23 parishes, and the 8 barrios of Port of Spain should be included 2 members of the Governor's Council of Advice, and be presided over by the governor. They desired that this assembly should at a later date determine the system of government and administration of justice most appropriate to the situation. Picton was not wholeheartedly in favor of this suggestion. He considered that with only 1/6 of the population English and not all those reliable, the concession of a free legislature might prove disastrous. He countered his suggestion with a proposal that certain picked planters and merchants should be given legislative. On the 9th of July, 1802, Trinidad was under the control of 3 commissioners. Colonel William Fullerton was the first, Captain Samuel, afterwards Sir Samuel, Hood the second, and Picton the third. On the arrival of Hood, the second commissioner, Picton tendered to the government his resignation, remaining at his post until his acceptance was notified. On 31st of May 1803, Picton learned that his resignation had been accepted, and on 11th of June, he was superseded by the military command by Brigadier General Frederick Maitland. On 14th of June 1803, Picton sailed from Trinidad, never to return. Picton after Trinidad. Picton did not immediately leave the Caribbean as he went to Barbados, where he met Lieutenant General Greenfield, the commander-in-chief in the West Indies. Picton joined him in capturing St. Lucia and Tobago. Because of his actions in the recapture of these countries, Greenfield appointed him Commandant of Tobago. Within a few weeks, Picton learned that Fullerton had left Trinidad for England. After preferring against him before the Council of Trinidad, 36 criminal processes. Immediately, Picton headed to England, where he would spend the next 6 years defending his reputation against charges stemming from his governorship. In December 1803, he was arrested by order of the Privy Council and was confined in the house of Mr. Sparrow upon the oaths and deposition of Louise Calderon and 3 other persons of infamous character in Trinidad. He was bailed by his uncle in an enormous security of £40,000. The indictment charged him with the unlawful application of torture to extort confession from Louise Calderon respecting a robbery. Legal battles of Picton. He was tried in the Court of King's Bench before Lord Ellenborough in 1806 on many charges, the most prominent being of unlawfully applying torture to extort a confession to Louisa Calderon, a free mulatto girl who had been charged, along with a man, with robbery. The torture consisted in compelling the trusted-upon girl to stand on one toe on a flat-headed peg for 1 hour on many occasions, within a span of a few days. The torture had been ordered and approved by Picton. Of the 37 charges against Picton, including the more serious charge of burning alive of Negroes and mulatto for alleged poisoning, only the charge of unlawful torture of Louisa Calderon was proved. On these grounds, the court returned a technical verdict of guilty, which was superseded in 1808 by a special verdict on retrial. It is alleged that Picton and his friends had used all their influence to browbeat and threaten the witnesses, many of whom rescinded from their original testimonies, resulting in the acquittal. Here is a picture of the torture that Louise Calderon had to go through, what is commonly known as picketing. Picton in Europe. In 1810, at Wellington's request, he was appointed to command a division in Spain for the remaining years of the Peninsular War. Picton was one of Wellington's principal subordinates during this time. After the winter in the lines of Torres Vedras, he added to his reputation and to that of his division, the fighting turned at the Battle of Fuentes de Orono. In September, he was given the local rank of Lieutenant General, and in the same month the division won great glory by its rapid and orderly retirement, under severe pressure from the French cavalry at Ile Bourgogne. In October, Picton was appointed to the colonelcy of the 76th Regiment of. While nursing some wounds and a bout of fever, he returned to Britain after storming of the fortress of Badajoz. While home, he was invested with the colour and badge of a KB by the Prince Regent George, and in June he was made a Lieutenant General in the Army. Picton's death. When Napoleon returned from Elba, Picton, at Wellington's request, accepted a high command in the Anglo-Dutch army. He was severely wounded at Fort Bras on 16th of June, but concealed his wound and retained command of his troops. At Waterloo, 2 days later, while repulsing with impetuous valor one of the most serious attacks made by an enemy on our position, he was shot through the temple by a musket ball, making him the highest ranking victim of the battle on the Allied side. On subsequent examination, Picton's body was found to have suffered a serious musket ball wound to the hip at Fort Bras on the 16th. Apart from his servant, he had told no one, nor had he consulted a surgeon, choosing instead to bandage the wound himself, Berengar. His body was brought home to London and buried in the family's vault at St. George Church, Hanover Square. A public monument pictured below was erected to his memory in St. Paul's Cathedral. A brief synopsis. Thomas Picton served in the British Army from 1772 until his death in 1815. He had an undistinguished military career until his appointment as commander of the 3rd Division in Wellington's Peninsular Army in 1810. Due to his service 1810 to 1815, he became a national hero. Killed on the battlefield at Waterloo, 1815, his body was interred in the family vault in St. George Cemetery, Hanover Square, London. In 1827, a publicly subscribed monument was erected in his honour in Carmarthen Square, Wales. On 8th of June 1859, Picton's body was reinterred in St. Paul's Cathedral, London, by order of the Secretary of State for the Home Department. The bibliography.